Hello and welcome to Time Trek. I'm your host, Peter Connor, and today we're here to discuss the military exploits of Henry V. Now, this is the first time probably you've seen this channel, it's the first video on the channel, so just a little quick intro. I'm Peter Connor. I've got a master's degree in history from the University of Leicester, if that means anything to anyone. But today we're kicking off, we're starting with the great King Henry V of England. Some say the greatest king ever to rule England. According to the play, no king of England, if not king of France. And no one man came closer to marrying the realms of England and France into one crown. This was to do what had been the dream of all of his Plantagenet predecessors, dating all the way even back to the Angevin Empire under Henry II. But Henry V himself was never born to be King of England. At the time of his birth, he was just another son of another noble family, the Bolingbroks. His change of status came when he was just 12 years old, and that's when his father, Henry IV, usurped his cousin, Richard II, and he became king. But being the son of a usurping family and the Lancastrian dynasty, it meant that he faced many challenges to his crown. So I'd like to begin by talking about Henry V's very combatant childhood. So probably the main test came from the revolt led by Owen Glendower. One historian even says that the revolt of Owen Glendower in the first decade of the 15th century was the greatest in Anglo-Welsh relations. This kind of culminated in the first of many battles I'm going to be talking about today. This is the Battle of Shrewsbury. We have a rebellion, obviously led by Owen Glendower. He effectively secures up many castles in Wales, pretty much the whole territory of Wales by the early 1400s. He then teams up with the disgruntled English barons in the north, some feeling they've got a stronger claim to the English throne. So we've got the House of Percy, who were led by Henry Hotspur. That's the Henry Hotspur who the Tottenham Hotspur club are named after. If you're a big football fan, of course Tottenham Hotspur have to be named after a perennial loser. That just makes sense. Henry Hotspur, he was a northern earl in a northern march in Northumbria. He was the Northumbrian earl. He teamed up with Owen Glendower, and he also teamed up with the Kingdom of Scotland led by Archibald Douglas, and they all teamed up effectively to take on Henry IV and take his crown from him. And this culminated in the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403, which was a huge battle in the Middle Ages. We're talking of collective strength of over 30,000 people being involved in this battle. Let's delve into the battle even further. So on one side we've got the Kingdom of England led by, of course, Henry IV and his son Henry, Prince of Wales. They have a strength of around 14,000 men. The rebels were led by Henry Hotspur, who of course we've gone into, who is the leader of the House of Percy. We also have Thomas, Earl of Worcester, who actually dies in this battle, so it didn't work out too well for him. Of course, then we've got Owen Glendower, who is representing the Kingdom of Wales. We have also a man called Archibald Douglas, who is fighting, representing the Scottish or the Kingdom of Scotland. Of course, always wanting to stick one into the English. They also have a collective strength of at least 14,000, probably more than those loyal to the crown, but of course results in a loyalist victory. The capturing and imprisonment of Archibald Douglas, he actually becomes a POW, and Owen Glendower, he actually lives to fight another day. He kind of runs away with his tail between his legs. We're talking about a collective loss of about 5,000 men that die in this battle, so it is actually an incredibly bloody battle for the time. So why is this a big thing for Henry V? Well, Henry V actually leads the left-hand side of the battle. He is a very prominent figure in the battle. He actually also gets injured quite badly, which leads to a very cool battle scar that he has down the right hand side of his face, I believe, for the rest of his life. He actually takes an arrow directly to the face, probably around just below the lower eye, around there, that area, and it apparently goes 6 inches deep into his skull. Does not sound fun, and it usually would have been a death sentence at that time had it not been for the work of John Bradmore, who actually used a screw-like mechanism to clasp around the arrowhead in his head, clasped the arrowhead and slowly took the arrowhead out of his face. But one other important thing to notice in this battle is he did first see the effectiveness and deadliness of the longbow. It was a much more powerful weapon than the crossbow. The longbow, it could be reloaded more. Power was so strong it could actually pierce through armour. At the Battle of Shrewsbury, it was actually the first time that Henry V saw the effectiveness of the longbow. So of course we know Owain Glendower, he runs off with his tail between his legs, trying to escape and fight another day, but Henry V ain't having that. He wants to fight for his name. He is the Prince of Wales. After another series of battles, I'll list them off here. We've got the Battle of Stalling Down, which of course the English win. We've got the Battle of Grosmont in 1405, so 2 years after Shrewsbury. Of course the English win. And then we've got the Battle of Ploemel, which is also in 1405. The English then went on to recapture Anglesey, and a large part of South Wales was then captured. This was 1408, 1407. Then in 1408 they actually capture Aberystwyth Castle. Then in 1409 they actually capture Harlech Castle. Now these sieges of Aberystwyth Castle and Harlech Castle, they are going to mirror some of his exploits in France. Although, you know, Henry managed to win against Owain Glendower, you know, we shouldn't think of Owain Glendower as a barbarian. He was not a barbarian at all. He was a very skilled diplomat. He managed to secure a very impressive alliance with France in 1405, and obviously the famous high numbers of archers at Agincourt was first tested in the land campaigns that dated back to the Welsh Wars. So these high number of archers, which would become a key hallmark in the later campaigns of Henry V, they were first officially tested in the Welsh Wars against Owain Glendower. Indeed, as one historian says, truly Owain Glendower kept his standard flying and earned the respect and finally the pardon of the young English prince to whom he taught so much. So after Owain Glendower is dealt with by Henry V, well, it's about 4 more years until Henry V actually becomes king. Obviously, his father has to die first. That's how it is with kingship, one-man rule, autocratic system. There's a wonderful story of when his dad is dying in bed, on his deathbed effectively. The prince actually puts on his father's crown, and his dad says, "By what right do you have to wear that crown?" And the famous reply is the same way that his father did, by the right of conquest, by the sword. It seems very much that from the moment he became King of England, he had one ambition, one drive, and that was to go and invade France. So how does he do it? Where does it begin? And what's his plan? He began building up his army in through the years of 1413 to 1414, planning to sail in the summer of 1415. The warring, sieging seasons usually from about the summertime till October, Halloween. That's when the last harvest comes in. So that's when usually medieval warfare fighting time of the year would have been over. So his plan was to go and fight in 1415. He pretty much gathers all his troops and everything he needs on the southern English coast around Southampton. He gathers the largest army England's seen since Edward III, and he sails for France. He's got Thomas, Duke of Clarence, that's his younger brother. Humphrey's going with him also, his younger brother. We've got Edward, Duke of York, probably a force of around 25,000 men, 20,000 men. And his plan is quite simple, is to attack a city on the River Seine. Obviously goes straight into Paris itself. It flows from the north of France and goes into Paris. So his plan was to capture a town on the river and then effectively go down river and then capture Paris. Harfleur is a city in Normandy, the north coast of France. Ticks all the boxes for Henry. It's often disputed at this time in 1415, what is Henry's true goal? Is he wanting the crown of France right from the get-go? Or is he maybe setting his sights on a lesser ambition, maybe just securing Normandy, you know, pretty much bringing it back to the Angevin Empire type levels? One thing is clear and is well known is that Henry emphasises to his troops and to his men that they are not to, you know, rape and pillage the land as they go. He wants to rule Normandy. This is a war of hearts and minds as well. Without further ado, he gets to Harfleur. And he's hoping for a very, very quick siege of Harfleur, and then he can go down to Paris and, you know, do the business in Paris. So he gets to Harfleur around August of 1415, and it's a much longer protracted siege than Henry actually wants. It actually takes him a lot longer than he wanted to completely surround the city. That is, to be able to cut off all of supplies effectively coming in and out of the city. That's the first thing you need to do if you're besieging a city. But he does eventually, and he also brings 5 cannons with him that he's pretty much bombarding the city of Harfleur with for the entire time he's besieging the city, about a month, constantly firing them cannons. These are earlier cannons, so they're not ones that can be fired, you know, like every 20 minutes or so. They're more like every 4 or 5 hour cannon. These castle walls were not designed to, you know, face cannons. But the French are very, very resistant, so when they break down the wall, the French are very quick to rebuild with rubble, dirt, which is mainly what they use, which is much better at taking cannonballs. The Harfleur residents, they're waiting for the King of France, Charles VI, and the Dauphin, who is the heir to the French throne. They're waiting for him. He's just down the river, and they're hoping on the River Seine in Rouen at the time, and they're hoping that he gonna get upriver. But the French, they never get there. And Henry V eventually gets to a point where the people being besieged they originally request 12 days in which to wait for the French king, and if the French king doesn't come by then, they'd open up the gates. But Henry says no, you've got 5 days, because by this time his army suddenly starts getting very sick. Dysentery is what effectively starts riddling his army. Now, I originally said he's got about 20,000 men, maybe a bit less. By the time he gets round to Agincourt, which is about a month or 2 later, he's only got about half that. We know he's lost at least a third of his army to dysentery. So, as I say, he offers 5 days, and the 5 days come and go. And on the 22nd of September 1415, he effectively secures Harfleur. But it's a bit of a Pyrrhic victory at this moment, because the campaigning season's coming to an end. He's gone on too long now for him to be able to get down to Paris or even to Rouen, some of the other great cities of Normandy. So obviously, after securing Harfleur, he's now got a problem, because he's secured a city, but it's not really a city, it's more of a pile of rubble. The second the French come back, they can just reclaim that pile of rubble. It's very hard to defend. So a lot of people are urging Henry to stay, secure his position, secure his holdings. I think that's why one of the main reasons Henry V is regarded as such a great king of England is the risks he took. He's practically bankrolled the entire nations just to go and fight this war in France. If he comes back with nothing, he's going to be paying that back for the rest of his life, effectively not being hampered by Parliament, never to be able to fight a war again because of the failure. So yeah, his plan after Harfleur is to draw the French out and into battle, because if he doesn't draw the French out and into battle, the French could just reclaim Harfleur. Effectively tries to make his way towards Calais, which is an English holding on the North French coast. There's effectively a bit of chess going back and forth, leads Henry and the French army into Agincourt. So the Battle of Agincourt is the stuff of legend, but for what reason, why? Some modern historians say ultimately it was effectively for nothing in the grand scheme of things, because in the long run the French, obviously France is still France. Let's delve into the numbers. The English side, we've got a depleted English army, probably comprising around 6,000 to 8,100, and most importantly, about 5-6 of that are archers. So we're only talking about maybe 1,000 men at arms. So on the opposite side, we've got the French, which is up to 25,000 in strength, 10,000 men at arms, and we've probably only got about 4,000 to 5,000 archers or crossbowmen, because these were probably most likely crossbowmen. We're talking the 25th of October 1415 when the actual battle is fought. So that's right at the end of campaigning season. It'd been heavily raining the night before. The field had just been freshly ploughed. So just picture the muddiest field you've ever seen in your life. 2 woods on either side, and English at one side at the bottom and the French at the other side at the top. And effectively the French marched into battle with their horses, the men at arms, the cavalry, and the English with their 2 pike as defences, wooden pikes, which they actually used quite effectively. And Henry V had actually stolen that from the Ottomans, I believe, so he had all his archers positioned behind these wooden spikes, obviously hoping that even if the horses got to them, they'd be stabbed by the wooden spikes. But not many of them even got to the archers, because what actually happened is a slaughter. The French came and marched in, they got caught in the heavy mud, and it was just a bloodbath. English longbow slaughtered the French. Up to 6,000 people killed, and most of the French aristocracy lay dead. And on top of that, we had a further 700 to 2,200 captured. This is opposed to, on the English side, just about 600 people that died. Practically defeated the entire generation of the French nobility, left them even more disorganised, effectively destroyed the French army, so the French can't mount a serious challenge against him invading again. It's a very famous story. This is about 100 years later. So in 1521, when the French king Francis I, when he went to the Burgundian capital, a monk supposedly handed and presented the skull of John the Fearless to the King of France, and he said to the King of France, "Sire, this is the hole through which the English entered France." Now this is a very wise monk, I would say, because he's pretty much spot on there in that assessment. France didn't have a great king. They had the mad King Charles. He believed he was made of glass at various points in his life, and he was not the man to have in charge. In a one-man autocratic system, you need a strong, competent ruler, otherwise it all begins to fall apart. I don't want to denigrate mental illness. Obviously, you know, it's not something he chose himself. The French descend into civil war, and 2 very prominent sides come up against each other. On one side, in the red corner, we've got the Burgundians, led by John the Fearless, the famous skull that was held up. John the Fearless, he was a grandson of a king of France, but more importantly, he was the Duke of Burgundy. Burgundy had been kind of a part of France, like part of France, but not really part of France, kind of being their own semi-independent thing. And the Burgundians had secured more than just Burgundy. Flanders and much of the Low Countries came under their jurisdiction. So John the Fearless, he's the leader of the Burgundian faction. And then on the other side, we've got the Armagnacs, or the Orleans faction. The Duke of Orleans was the king's brother. He was actually murdered by a Burgundian in around 1407. So his son then became the Duke of Orleans, teaming up with the Armagnacs, another powerful family from France. Henry V then secured his an informal alliance with John the Fearless at first. John the Fearless, for example, promised that he wouldn't make it to the field of Agincourt, and by the end of his second campaign in France, it's actually John the Fearless who conquers Paris rather than Henry V, but it's John the Fearless working in cooperation with Henry V. Yeah, so Henry was able to take advantage at a time of tragedy in France. Henry hoped that the renewal of the war would unite the English, and above all, France continued to be in disarray, torn between rival factions of the Armagnacs and the Burgundians. It was an opportunity no ambitious king of England could afford to miss. For example, it's the Burgundians working with the English that capture Joan of Arc and hand Joan of Arc over to the English. So the Burgundian alliance actually lasts until around 1435, when Philip the Good makes peace with the French, and the French reunite and kick the English out. So it was only through this disunity that you could argue that what the English did and achieved was even possible. So we'll move on to Henry V's probably more impressive, in my opinion, than Agincourt, his second campaign, and the campaign that secured him the crown of France. He first launches his second campaign in 1417. He opens it with a siege on the northern coast of France. He goes to the siege of Caen, and he manages to secure an English victory there. Him and his brother, the Thomas Duke of Clarence, are there at the time, and so he secures the city of Caen, a very important northern city in Normandy. And then he goes on to the siege of Rouen, which is probably the siege that secures him the French throne. The siege of Rouen is a bit more intensive. The siege of Rouen goes from July 1418 and it lasts until January 1419, so it lasts a good 6 months, a much longer siege than the siege of Caen or the earlier siege at Harfleur, which took over a month. But he has all of his best men there. He has he has his brother, Duke of Clarence. He also has the Duke of Exeter, and my personal favourite person from the 100 Years' War, the Earl of Salisbury. It's probably arguable that when the Earl of Salisbury dies in 1428 from a cannon, it's pretty much downhill again from there from the English. The Earl of Salisbury is there at the Siege of Rouen with the Earl of Huntingdon too and John Cromwell. We've got about a strength of about 10,000 men. We know that Henry V actually inflicts around 12,000 civilian casualties on the Siege of Rouen. And then we have the Battle of La Rochelle, which is, I think, an example of the alliance helping out Henry. So this is actually on the 30th of December 1419. So this is taking place during the Siege of Rouen. The Battle of La Rochelle is not even fought between any Englishmen. There's no Englishmen involved. It's a naval battle fought between the Castilians and the Flanders, people from the Low Countries of Flanders. It's actually a defeat for the Flanders, but they actually lose 40 ships that get captured, and it's a Castilian victory. But it just shows that, you know, there's more fighting going on here. It's not just the English fighting the French. So yeah, after Rouen, after he secures the town of Rouen, then he pretty much secures the French throne. The French, they don't have an army, or most of their nobles and army have been killed at Agincourt. The Burgundians are now invading their capital. So what happens in the Treaty of Trèves in 1420 is the King Charles VI. Firstly, he offers the French throne to Henry V upon his death. So effectively, when Charles VI dies, Henry V will be crowned King of France. He's also offered the hand in marriage of the French king's daughter, Catherine of Valois. And it's actually Catherine of Valois who will be the mother of Henry VI, next King of England and France. But I guess this is kind of like why he's seen as a great King of England, because he dies pretty much around now at the height of his powers. He dies at the age of just 35 years old. But how does he die? Why does he die? It's not all 100%, it's all going well, because there are still a few pockets of resistance from the French. I think Henry sees these few pockets of resistance, much like he saw the pockets of resistance of the Welsh, which brings us on to, you know, the final phase, effectively. 2 more battles that I want to tell you about, but the first, we're going to talk about the Battle of Bourg, which took place on the 22nd of March 1421. This is a notable battle because it's a Franco-Scottish victory, and It's probably more noted because Thomas, Duke of Clarence, who was actually next in line to the throne at the time, Henry V's younger brother, he actually dies at the Battle of Bourg. That's on the 22nd of March 1421. So yeah, a bit of a warning shot there. Obviously anyone can be killed in battle. Richard the Lionheart, he got shot just by a crossbow from nowhere. Henry V, he's the guy to lead the battle. He wants to lead all these battles. He wants to lead his army into battle, and he leads them for one last time at the Siege of Moor, which is actually an English victory. The Siege of Moor actually takes place from 1421 October time till May 1422. So it actually takes place shortly after the Battle of Bourg. Henry V led his 24,000 troops to an English victory. They actually secured the castle eventually in Moor, but unfortunately he led to 6,000 dead of his own troops, mostly due to disease, due to dysentery. Henry V gets dysentery from the Siege of Moor, and he knows he's going to die. Is this a reason why he's seen as the great king of England? Because he dies at the perfect time. He dies at the height of his powers without having to suffer the practicalities, the perhaps impossibilities of marrying the realms of England and France together. Effectively, his early death at the age of 35 helped set him as the warrior protagonist of the English myth. Never was Henry weakened by infirmities of old age, inopportunity, or faced a rejuvenated France. Undeniably, it is difficult to believe that Henry could have continued the relentless pace of his youth had he not passed, and it's easy to agree that had he survived longer, he would have suffered from being able to marry the realms of England and France together, two very disparate kingdoms with different cultures and different outlooks. So, in conclusion, I think it's very, very evident that Henry's own personal bravery is in little doubt. He is definitely one of the bravest kings to ever rule England, marching headlong into battle, getting himself a wicked cool scar at the age of 17, fighting the Welsh in his early teenage years, and then fighting the French. At Agincourt, when his brother the Duke of Gloucester had been wounded and overthrown by the Duke of Aquitain, he had rushed into the melee and saved his brother's life. This was a significant factor in accounting for Henry V's military successes. However, this bold daring would also prove to be his downfall. As a man of war, constant war, he succumbed to what happens to most soldiers. A king is no different from any other soldier. If you're constantly fighting, if you're constantly at war, then you're very, very likely to suffer the consequences of war. But overall, it's indisputable that Henry V had many reasons that contributed to his overall success as a warrior. Probably chief among these, and indisputably, was Henry's soldiering apprenticeship as a young man, being tested against the Welsh and Owen Glendower, as well as the Percys. However, what is also another indisputable factor in allowing Henry's rise was the diabolical situation in France. A civil war with an unstable monarch provided a substantial opening for the English to enter France. So even the people of the Dauphin, writing for the Dauphin of France, even they speak out highly well of him, which says a lot. If even the French chroniclers, even they're speaking highly of you, that's probably a good sign. He was a man of unparalleled vision and military expertise. He was ultimately a man of unequalled vision, believing he was ordained by God to grasp his descendants' dreams. Henry's success as a soldier was undoubtedly aided by the divided and inept French, but this is almost to do a disservice to Henry, to the man of wild drive and unequalled understanding of all aspects of warfare. He was a great king, and that's about it. So thank you for watching. I hope you liked. If you did like, please obviously hit the thumbs up button, early channel, so that would be a big help. Hit subscribe if you liked it. Thank you, and goodbye, good day.